Good afternoon and welcome to the New Capital webinar, Ukraine, Russia, and Markets. This is Catherine Barr, Director of Communications at New Capital. Before we get started, I'm going to read the regulatory disclosures. This New Capital presentation is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be used for any other purpose. The information presented does not constitute and should not be construed as an offering of advisory services or an offer to sell or solicitation to buy any securities, related financial instruments, financial services, or other services in any jurisdiction. Past investment performance is not an indication of future results. Wherever there is the potential for profit, there is also the possibility of loss. Certain information contained herein concerning economic trends and performance is based on or derived from information provided by independent third-party sources. New Capital believes that the sources from which such information have been obtained are reliable. However, we cannot guarantee the accuracy of such information and have not independently audited these sources. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leonard.
Thank you, Catherine. Welcome, everybody. This is a topic that's drawn a lot of interest. We've had quite a lot of people sign up for this. I think it was 30 or more. I first want to start by saying war is a tragedy. It's a failure of people to resolve differences in a more civilized way. And this part of the world knows war very, very well. It has been a long time since Europe in general, Europe at large has seen this kind of war. Thankfully, it's been decades since the Second World War, which was a cataclysm unlike the world has ever seen, and the Ukraine was a major focal point of battle in the Second World War. Not only battle between armies, but massacre of civilians. September 28th to 29 in 1941, 34,000 Jewish men, women, and children were marched out of Kiev, also pronounced Kiev these days. I say Kiev, which I think is the Russian pronunciation. Were marched, ordered to assemble, and marched to a ravine outside of Kiev, a ravine called Baba Yar, where they were, over a 2-day period, machine gunned to death by German Nazi Einsatzgruppen is what they were called, death squads. And so this part of the world knows war. Not only Ukrainians, but Russians, of course, lost 20 million people, soldiers and civilians, in the Second World War. And so it is a very sad and very difficult and sobering thing to see war return. And many people are struggling to understand, why has war returned? As the disclosure says, this is for presentation purposes only, and I'm going to probably end up interjecting my own views. You may agree with some, you may disagree. I mean no offense, I have my own personal views about Vladimir Putin, and I've had them for a long time. You may say, well, why am I entitled to have a view? And I guess that takes me to my next slide, which is, I took the opportunity in preparing for this talk, which admittedly I did very, very on short notice and quickly. I've done the best I can, and this is not intended to be my usual 30, 40 slide presentation. I've just tried to put together a few slides that we can have a conversation about. here as the work week comes to an end. And Catherine talked about Q&A. Let me also say that you have a chat feature. I think you have a chat feature. You should have a chat feature. And I'd like to sort of know, what do people, this is such a big subject, I'd like to sort of know, what do people want to know, maybe in specific. And so maybe you'll throw that into the chat, and that'll help me guide my comments. Obviously, we're together because I am your financial advisor, and so I will be talking about the market angles of that. But if there are other things too that you want to hear about, put it into the chat or the Q&A. Anyway, you may or may not know this about me. I was a Russian major in college, and I studied in a very, very strong Russian department at Amherst College. For example, well, here is I took the opportunity to take my thesis out. It's pretty thick, page after page of it's an economics paper about alcohol, really specifically vodka, which you may or may not know plays a very important economic role in Russia. And I wrote a history of taxation of alcohol and its role in the Tsarist economy. You can see from 1863 to 1913 are the dates, and so I submitted this to the Russian department, and my readers were Professor Peter Zapp, Jane Taubman, and Bill Taubman won a Pulitzer Prize for his biography of Nikita Khrushchev, and still teaches it is still active on the faculty, amazingly, at Amherst. And this was in December 1988. And why did I major in Russian? Well, it was a very strong department at Amherst. But in 1988, well, that was when I submitted the thesis, but I began the pursuit of the major in 1984. And so I think most people on today's call can remember that the Soviet Union and anchored by Russia was the big mortal enemy of the United States. And the world was divided between the United States and Russia. And I thought, I really should know more about this place that we heard so much about and was demonized in so many ways. I should know more about it. And I actually went and studied there in 1986. Mikhail Gorbachev had just become the it's not the president, I don't think. At the time, he was the general secretary of the Communist Party is what the official title was. General secretary, I think it was something like that. But he had become the leader of Russia and had begun the process of perestroika, the rebuilding of Russia. And the rebuilding eventually in 1991 became the tumbling down of the Soviet Union, which was we have no appreciation for the trauma that ensued. And there's a lot of responsibility to go around as to why Russia has developed as it has since then. Anyway, so I studied in Russia in 1986, and I can remember that very well, that it was very hard to find food. I would go into stores and there would be a grocery store, and there would be all of these babushkas, these grandmothers with their scarves on, fighting over bits of chicken and a few little small crab apples. Bread was in plentiful supply, though, which is important to know because Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, and so that part of the world lives on bread. And for all of what Putin says about NATO and causing him to do this, and he's got to denazify my guess is this is just a land grab, a classic land grab, because Ukraine is so incredibly strategically located at the northern end of the Black Sea. Some of you know that I made my first trip in September, past September, to Istanbul in Turkey, which is the city that sits on the Bosporus Straits at the southern end of the Black Sea. And so it's an incredibly strategically important place. By land area, Ukraine is the second largest country after Russia in Europe, 40 some odd million people. So I have quite a bit of interest in this topic, and it goes way back. Not only that, but my last name is Russian. There it is. I looked this up on Google. You can see right here on the right, Golub is this is the Cyrillic characters, Golub and Golub, and it means dove. But I would always, when I was in Russia, I would always get sort of snickers because it also means pigeon. There's only one word there's only one word in Russian for both dove and pigeon. We distinguish them here. They're actually the same bird. They're not different. I've looked this up from bird experts and online, and the dove, the white dove, I think may be a rock pigeon. It just happens to be, but they're basically the same species. I think there's no difference in their DNA, and so I'd always get snickers. And I thought, why are they snickering? It means dove, and they're like, no, it means pigeon. And I guess they were thinking, this is what you see in cities. Anyway, either way, dove, pigeon, it's the same thing. And my family has a history as a Jewish family that immigrated from an area near a small town in Lithuania, the town of Radun near Vilnius. And thankfully they left in the early part of the 20th century. Had they not, they would have been murdered during the Second World War, during the Holocaust. I want to play a video now. I don't know if you all have seen this. This has come out recently. The man you're looking at there is Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who has been much in the news in the last few years. You may remember this is the guy that Donald Trump tried to shake down for dirt on investigation into Joe Biden, who's now the president of the United States. And he's a former comedian and actor. And many people wonder if he is up to this. And of course, the target on his head right now is enormous. So let me play this here. I don't know if you all have seen this.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні!
Really moving. That's the top leadership of the Ukrainian government in the streets somewhere at night, in their fatigues, their battle fatigues. These people are going to fight for their country. And Vladimir Putin is going to find that out. He's finding that out. He may have to kill everyone there, and he may decide that he's going to do that. But they're going to fight. And the president, unlike the president in Afghanistan, is not going to abandon his post. And so that's where that is at. If anybody is wondering, martial law has been declared, and all able-bodied men have been ordered to remain in the country. And not only are they going to remain, they're willing to remain. And apparently there are large-scale signups of volunteers that are going on. Let's see. How do I go to the next page here?
Всім добрий
Sorry,
вечір.
everybody.
Лідер фракції.
Got myself in kind of a loop here. Let me try this. Okay, and here you see these are new volunteers, Ukrainian volunteers. These are not regular army. These are new volunteers in the Ukrainian army, and it may be that Russia will have to, the Russian army will have to take building by building, which is going to be incredibly tragic. Hopefully the world will somehow manage to intervene before that is the case. But Ukrainians just have nowhere else to go. I guess they can all go to Poland, but they don't want to. This is their land, and they're going to fight for it. And they've now had 30 years of a taste of their own country. And they've now had 6 or 7 years since the revolution in 2014. And I want to recommend, if you're looking for a good background movie, there is a movie that you can see on Netflix called Winter on Fire, which is a documentary about the 2014 revolution. Highly recommended, Winter on Fire. And I would watch it tonight if you have something that you can do. They're going to fight for their country. Now, let's talk about Russian companies in New Capital portfolios, because that's probably something people have an interest in knowing, either from the perspective of, what's my risk exposure to ethical questions of do I want them in the portfolio. So here are just a few samples of funds that we preference and their holdings. DFCEX is an emerging markets fund. Russia is less than 1%. That's a pure emerging markets fund, only emerging market companies in that fund, under 1%. This is an international fund, DFAX. I like it particularly for taxable portfolios, and it's less than 1/3%. Very, very small allocations. DREIX is a global fund that I like to use, and there it is. So this includes American companies and international companies both, and there the allocation is 0.1%, roughly. And this is a sustainable emerging markets fund. So it's all emerging markets, but it's focused on sustainability. And since Russia's heavy in oil, it's about 1/3%. VT is a Vanguard fund, a global fund, and about 1/3%. So you can see that Russia does not account for very much at all in New Capital portfolios. And you may have come to this call today simply wanting to know that, what's my exposure? And so you can see that it's de minimis. So I wanted to get that out of the way sort of early on. And so let's talk about some ideas here. This is a battle between democracy and autocracy. That really is the big picture here. I don't think anybody should be under any illusion. I don't think it's about NATO. These are my views. I don't think it's about NATO in particular. I don't think it's about Nazis occupying the Ukrainian government. I think that Vladimir Putin, who is an autocrat, who is reputed to be the wealthiest person in the world through presumably theft of assets, with a wealth approaching maybe $1 trillion, 5 times Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, is threatened by having democracies on his border, and especially in Ukraine, where, as I indicated before, the territory is so strategically critical and valuable. The Ukraine, in addition to being located where it is also considered to be the breadbasket to many parts of the world. Ukraine is a breadbasket to Africa. It's a breadbasket to the Middle East. and likely a breadbasket to a good part of Europe as well. So this is a battle between democracy and autocracy. It's my view, and it's been my view for a long time, that Vladimir Putin is the black heart, really the black heart at the heart of many of the world's problems, governmental problems, the fomenting of autocracy and the diminishment of democracy. And of course, we had a real strong, I wouldn't even call it a brush, a real strong interaction with that in this country in 2016, when all indications are, including official conclusions by the Mueller report, that the Russian government was extremely active in trying to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. We know that that Facebook, the social media site, was extremely vulnerable to manipulation and was manipulated during the time of the election. It's not hard to see that a world with a different Russia, a Russia integrated fully into Europe and the democracies of the world, that world looks a lot different than a world led by Vladimir Putin. This war is, and I know I'm not saying anything that people don't know. I'm sure everybody on this call is interested in reading many of the same things that I'm reading, but the long-held vision for centuries that Russia would be integrated into Europe. And when I say integrated, I mean it'll feel like it's a part of Europe. And this has always been the problem at the heart of the Russian conundrum. Are they European? Are they Asian? Are they different? It's sort of like being Texan, right? Are we East? Are we West? Well, no, we're Texan. We're neither. And it's sort of the same thing with Russia. They're not fully part of, and don't feel themselves to be fully part of Europe. There are many trappings of European culture. And it was, of course, Peter the Great who attempted in the 18th century to drag Russia, kicking and screaming out of the sort of the backwoods serfdom that characterized Russian society at that time, orthodox and agrarian, and centered around Moscow. And he was determined to change Russia and built the city of Petersburg on the Baltic, and changed Russia forever in that way. And yet it's never fully, totally worked. Russia continues to feel like it's got to have buffer zones, and who could blame it after the invasion by Nazi Germany in the Second World War, and the incredible death toll and destruction that took place from another, in my view, pathological or sociologically defective dictator in Adolf Hitler. So this war is going to severely hamper, if not set back for a long time, Russian-European integration. And what impact that has on securities, what impact that has on markets, we don't know. We just can't say, but it's safe to say that what's going on right now is a complete rethinking of the project to integrate Europe in. I personally have never believed that Vladimir Putin, who was a KGB agent, was a guy who was going to provide for Russian integration. And yet I think both the American government and the European governments have held out hope that somehow he would see the light. But I never bought that. Another idea, as I said, Ukrainians are fighting. They're going to fight for their territory. And can I say that Kiev is not going to fall tonight? I can't say that. I don't know anything about that. But when people are willing to die for their homeland, all bets are off, regardless of firepower. And the word that is coming out of U.S. intelligence today that I've seen is that the Russians are completely behind. Whatever time frames they had, they were going to take Kiev in 24 or 48 hours. That's gone. And once those time frames start to slip in war, those are the indicators that things are not going the way that that the invader had expected them to go, not going according to plan. And then the question is, well, are there adjustments that can be made? You know, or is the whole enterprise completely fraught and flawed and will not succeed? Too early to know. We don't know, but that's really, to me, the big news today. And you're going to hear lots of news, but the big news is that they are not on their time frames, and the Ukrainians are fighting. And so they're going to fight, and they're willing to die. And if you are willing to die while you're fighting, it's going to be a much tougher fight for the invading army. We have the return of petropolitics. Oil is already around $100 a barrel, and Russia supplies maybe 50%, I think, maybe the number of energy needs, often in the form of natural gas, to Western Europe. And we are now in a return of petropolitics as the world, including the United States and including the American petroleum industry, tries to understand, what does this mean for the supply of oil and gas? And where does the Middle East fit into this? And will Middle Eastern countries be able to make up for supply if Russian supplies are evacuated from the market, whether intentionally by the Russians or whether it's boycotted? And so we're in the early days of understanding where that is, but it's it's not hard to see that we could see further spikes in oil prices. I want everybody to remember that $100 oil today is not the same as $100 oil in 2005, for example. We've had inflation since then. And so the value of the dollar may have depreciated by half. And so we would have to see $200 oil today to see the equivalent of where last time we saw $100 oil would have been, 15 years ago. But nevertheless, it's something that Americans are feeling at the pump, and how Americans interpret that may have a lot to do with how Americans support for this war, and which way they throw their support, whether it's political parties within the United States or how they view Russia or Ukraine, may well come down to the price of oil and gas, and that may be something that Putin is counting on, but we don't know yet. There are indications that Putin has grown more paranoid. I saw his recorded videos. I don't know if any of you took a look at that, but he didn't look good to me. He looked like he was under a lot of stress, and there are accounts that he's just sort of lost his mind, lost his reason, and that he has begun to believe in conspiracies, and begun to believe things that, while they may have a hint of something to them, that at their heart are just complete far-fetched paranoid fantasies, such as the United States and Western Europe are out to get Russia, like that, or that Ukraine posed an existential threat to Russia. You could work yourself into believing these things based on certain viewpoints, but the leader of a nation is fundamentally tasked with arriving at rational conclusions with intelligence and with support, and empirical information. And it appears that either Putin is making self-serving statements, or either that, or he completely has lost his grip on reality, and that's not good. That's not good. But it is a question right now that I think is probably circulating in intelligence circles, and a lot of people are saying why. And moreover, there are there are indications that the people of Russia, many of the people, especially the younger people in Russia, do not at all support this action. There are large-scale demonstrations that are taking place in Russia, although they're being suppressed. There are riot police who are simply shutting down peaceful. We're not surprised at this, but they're simply shutting down peaceful anti-war demonstrations. And I am quite sure that the young people of Russia do not want to attack the young people of the Ukraine or the Ukraine at all. That is not the future that they want. And I think that Putin simply has completely lost touch with his people and where they are at as he tries to reinvent the Soviet Union and reinvent empire. We're not living in an age of recreating empire anymore. The world has many other problems. We've moved on from the age of empire. And yet here he is trying to make Russia great again and make the Soviet Union great again. And the response that the West is undertaking is to turn Russia into a pariah. And the actions that are being taken are not just by governments. In the last day, we have seen the Formula One circuit group cancel the Russian Grand Prix. And I can tell you, because I attended the US Grand Prix in Austin last year with Abby, that was a crazy amount of people there. It was like 152,000 people outside of Austin. Formula One Grand Prix is a massive thing. The soccer tournament, the World Soccer Tournament, can't remember what it's called, but it happens every year, has now been taken away from Russia. And so the integration of Russia that has taken place now after 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union, while again, Russian and European integration is now going to be, I guess you could say, halted, or it's going to be put on hiatus. There is a substantial amount of Russian-European integration and Russian global integration that's taken place over the 30 years. Whatever else we can say about Vladimir Putin, he has invited and allowed the integration and the penetration into Russia of Western products and services and events. And that has been ongoing. And so it's going to be a real shock to the Russian people for all that to just be yanked. We're seeing news today that some Russian conductor, famous conductor, who's very close with Putin from their early days, has now been kicked out of Carnegie Hall, and his concerts are being canceled. And so this is going to be a really hard thing for Russians. And I have no ability to predict, but they're proud people. And I'm not so sure that they're going to be willing to continue to be pariahs in order to invade their neighbor. So there's that. We see a revitalized NATO. NATO, which was really under assault by Donald Trump during his tenure as U.S. president. Nothing has gotten NATO back together faster, nor could you imagine anything getting NATO back together faster than a Russian attack, which is exactly why NATO was formed in the first place. And so NATO's thinking that it wasn't needed. And this is the whole sort of unbelievable thing about it, is that Putin was claiming that, I couldn't take having NATO right on my doorstep. He has NATO right on his doorstep. The Baltic countries are right there and may well be in the crosshairs. The U.S. has recently sent troops to bolster NATO defense in the Baltics, but he doesn't want NATO on his doorstep, and he wants a weak NATO, and he's going to keep NATO weak by keeping it out of Ukraine. Well, the one thing he could have done to strengthen NATO more than any other was to invade Ukraine, and that's exactly what he did. And so Putin has continued to take steps that have had exactly the contrary effect of what he has intended. And that's another reason why people are wondering if what most people who have encountered him see as a very, very bright person if he's sort of lost his reasoning capability. Return of U.S. leadership. The accounts that I've read, one especially from the New York Times out a couple of days ago, about how the Biden administration began last October to put together and assemble strategies and coalitions to deal with the intelligence that it was receiving that Russia intended to invade Ukraine. And we can imagine also that if that's when U.S. intelligence got wind of it, the plan to do so would have been hatched shortly after probably the U.S. election. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if after Joe Biden was certified as the president of the United States and took office, that Vladimir Putin said, I'm on a limited time here because Biden is not going to tolerate a sellout of Ukraine, where we don't know what Donald Trump might have done when he was privately meeting with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, Finland, and said all these nice things at the press conference afterwards. We'll never know. It was two interpreters in the room. But I suspect, as anyone someone should write a play about this, right? Sometimes there are plays written about, what was said in the room at these critical times. Someone should write a play about what was said between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in their, I think 4 or 5 times they met. But I wouldn't be surprised if when Joe Biden was inaugurated, that Putin said, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it now. In October, U.S. intelligence became aware of it. And the U.S. has apparently exerted very, very judicious leadership, including in the strategic publicizing of its intelligence in advance. And the U.S. in the lead up to the attack basically divulged exactly what was going to happen and pretty much when. And that has had the salubrious effect of helping to restore U.S. leadership, certainly in Europe, where people are looking at that and saying, the U.S. has been out in front of this. The Biden administration is also being respectful in the application of sanctions and allowing Europe to sort of lead on things and not getting out front in announcing all these sanctions before Europeans do. They seem to have a good coordination going, and that's by intent. And then there is the question of sanctions themselves. What will they do? Will they work? What does work mean? And we don't know. And so the Ukrainians right now, it could change, are being left to fight the battle themselves with supply of arms. How long they can hold out against airplanes without their own planes, and how long they can hold out against tanks without their own supply of tanks, I don't know. Right now, there is no intention of NATO to send troops, but it's not impossible, I don't think, that if it continues for another week or two, that NATO may say, we're going to declare a no-fly zone. I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but these things could move very quickly, especially if European populations take to the streets and demand it. And if they do that, you could well see this thing spread in the sense that NATO announces it's not going to allow Russian planes to fly over Ukraine, just period. They're going to say that Russia has no more right to fly over the Ukraine than NATO does. And so we don't know where this is headed, folks, and nobody should assume that just because there have been pledges that no troops will be fighting there, that does not change. It could. And then the last idea I have here is that this is not the first war, but it's the first big major war where iPhones and social media are in existence. The U.S. invasion of Iraq, which I was strongly against and publicly said so, and in many ways, Putin himself has returned to speaking about the U.S. invasion of Iraq and has said things like, well, if the U.S. can behave this way, why can't I? That's really, I think, the way he thinks about it. And hopefully for Americans, the horror of this invasion will bring home to us the horror of our own invasion back in Iraq. And it should put to rest any doubt that the invasion by our country of another country, which resulted in such catastrophic catastrophe, catastrophic catastrophe. I mean, don't know how else to put it. That we'll think about our own history there. Putin has a point. You know, if the U.S. could do this, why can't I? I think he draws the wrong lessons, which is that's not the right thing to do. But this conflict is already being reported on widely and everywhere through the use of phones and social media. And what effect that has, we don't know. World War II, another slide, World War II, just checking my time in the S&P 500. You may want to know, when there is war, widespread war like World War II, which was as widespread as it gets, what has the stock market done? War started in 1939, September, was it 1st, 1939? I think it was September 1st, 1939, when German troops attacked Poland. And Soviet troops came from the other side, and Poland was partitioned. The stock market, that was later in the year, the stock market down 40 basis points. 1940, down 9.8 as Nazi Germany steamrolled France. 1941, the launch of Operation Barbarossa, and the attack on the Soviet Union, down 11.6. So the U.S. stock market was not very happy about gains by Nazi Germany. The U.S. attacked at Pearl Harbor in December 7th of 1941, widening the war to the United States. 1942, as the U.S. sort of struggled to get going in the war, the tide of the war began to turn that year in Russia. At the Battle of Stalingrad, late in that year, 20.3, the S&P 500 was up, 25.9 up in 1943, 19.7 up in 1944. D-Day occurred June 6th of 1944, and 1945, the end of the war, 36.4, and so that was how the S&P 500 went. It went sort of the way the war went. I think I've got annualized, that was a 10.1% return for the S&P 500. I don't like to put stock returns in light of war. I'm opposed to war. I'm a practicing Buddhist, and but I think it's instructive to see, as I talk to you, that that a war, even one the size of World War II, does not necessarily mean that you don't hold investments. That's all I'm trying to indicate. Let's look at year-to-date performance. The year is only almost 2 months old. Very early in the year, but let's look how things see how things look. The best performing sort of sector has been U.S. oil equipment, which has been down so long, you know, like 20 years, but it is the best performing sort of little micro industry. U.S. oil equipment makers up 24.89, and you may say, well, do I own some of that? And the answer is, yeah, you own some of that. It's in your portfolio. It's in a fund. In your portfolio, so yes, you own it. You probably own more than the average indexes because they've been value companies. So yes, you own some of it. It's helped you, but it hasn't been able to stave off the general market. The worst performing, there it is. Worst performing fund asset class. Russian stocks down 46.93, half of a. Half the value in Russian stocks has been lost. Some of you may say, well, it looks like a good buy. You'll have to call me if you're interested in that. I'm not going to purchase Russian stocks out of moral principle right now, but I don't say that anybody else should or shouldn't. My own feelings, yours may be different. Russian stocks have always traded at a big discount because of the Putin factor. Funds and investors don't trust Vladimir Putin to treat them well and preserve their shareholder rights. And so Russian stocks have always traded at a discount. Now they're trading at a big discount. They've lost half their value. US stocks year to date down 10.29%. And if we look at sectors of the market, I haven't put the detailed slide here because I didn't want too busy of a slide today, but the rotation out of growth and into value stocks has continued, or rather I should say the outperformance of value versus growth. You may remember I've talked about that a lot going back to the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, and the incredible outperformance of growth stocks versus value. And I warned that at some point it was going to reverse, and it began to reverse in October of 2020. And here we are with reversal still going on because US growth stocks have done about minus 15%, and US value stocks have done about minus 5%. So even though value stocks are still down, they're not down the 15%. In fact, they've tripled up the performance of US growth stocks. People have continued to rotate out of tech stocks and those sorts of stocks, and they've had a much harder go of it. International places like the UK and France, Canada, Australia, Japan has done actually quite well year to date. Only down 8%. It was even I say only only in comparison to U.S. stocks, and these international developed stocks, especially European stocks, down much more yesterday, when or a day ago. I'm losing track of time. When the invasion was launched, but very, very negative, especially for German stocks. The day after the invasion was launched, because until then the difference between U.S. and international developed was smaller. International developed was only down 5% or so for the year. Now 8%. Emerging markets have actually held up while they're negative, have doubled up the performance. And there's a saying in our business: you can't eat relative performance, right? If your money is shrinking, you can't eat that. But we're sort of in a fraught period right now, and trying to avoid really, really steep losses. And so emerging markets have provided some buffer. U.S. bonds down 4%. That's the aggregate bond index. That's the broad bond market, a collection of treasuries and corporate bonds and agency and mortgage-backed bonds, down 4%, as we've seen interest rates rise, longer-term interest rates rise, and the 10-year bond is now around 2%. You may remember that it was around 0.5% yield in August of 2020, and so we're now four times where that was. And but that's not bad. We need we don't need a 10-year Treasury bond yielding 0.5%. So we're starting to get some normalizing in the bond markets. Our heavy investment on your part in inflation-protected bonds has paid off very well, and especially in shorter-term inflation-protected bonds that we're much more heavily in longer-term inflation-protected bonds has really helped portfolios. And in terms of new capital portfolios, they've done very well over the last year, 2 years. And we've outperformed benchmarks very, very strongly, 2, 3, even 4% in some cases, and also strongly outperformed inflation. So I'm very, very proud and very happy with how portfolios have done. At the same time, if everything sort of falls apart as it has in the first 2 months of 2022, it's pretty hard to completely avoid that, and we haven't. Okay, what actions, and then we'll do some questions, that can we take, can we do? If you want to test your risk tolerance, if you feel that the war in Ukraine is causing you to think that, well, my risk tolerance is different, we can always do testing, retest you. It doesn't take long, and we're happy to do that. It just takes a few minutes for us to get on the Zoom call with you, and we can retest it. So just let us know if you want to do that. Allocations I'm thinking about some additional allocations to inflation-protected bonds, even though we're already very heavy in it, and maybe some additional allocations to commercial real estate, just as an additional inflation hedge. We have it in the portfolios, but I may want to do some more of that, and I'm just looking at valuations and seeing how I feel about that. Maybe commodities and natural resources has done very, very well this year. But it can disappoint also, and it can be very, very volatile. We've gotten some good benefit from emerging markets because they often track commodities and natural resources. But I'd be curious to hear if people are interested in this area. It's never a straightforward thing investing in commodities and natural resources. It can go against you. But if you're interested in that, let me know and I'll be happy to discuss it. And I want everybody to know that we may get buying opportunities. We thought we did. It was looking like pretty good buying opportunity a couple days ago on the invasion, and stocks for the year were then in certain cases down 20%. The NASDAQ and tech stocks and so on were down 20% year to date. And then today, very, very strong. And yesterday, the market was way down and did a complete U-turn and jumped back up in the middle of the day and ended close to neutral. And so the past day and a half of trading has been extremely positive for markets. And that may be a reflection that the Ukrainians are fighting. The markets may be taking heart from that and saying, you know what, they're going to stop him. I don't know if they're going to. They may not. But they may wind up putting up a really, really stiff fight. And again, I want to emphasize there are people dying, and there are young people dying. And warfare often is a bunch of old men deciding to send a bunch of young men to die. I think may have been Mark Twain or somebody who said that, but it often is the case. And so we should all take that, and I know we do, very, very seriously. It's a very, very sad situation that has developed there. And I think that's, one more thing. So charitable, we've done a little bit of research. Charity Navigator has given us a few ideas if you're interested in making some charitable contribution. And as I frequently say, New Capital is in the forefront of helping our clients make charitable contributions through our work with Fidelity Charitable and our setting up of charitable funds for clients. If you are interested in that, we've got some 4-star organizations. That means they get high ratings on both the way they run their financial business and also what is the other metric is do they meet their I think it's do they meet their mission, sort of those two things, the financial side of it and the mission side of it. And so these came to the surface on Fidelity Charitable and using the Fidelity Charity Navigator search thing. These are organizations, the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. Direct Relief is the name of an organization. Global Giving. Matthew 25 Ministries, apparently doing very important work in this area, and Save the Children. I don't know about the American Red Cross or others. If you know of anything and you know of particular organizations that are on the ground in Ukraine and you can bring that to our attention, if you happen to know of any of those, please do, and we will get that news out to others. But there is a developing very big refugee crisis as Ukrainians surge to the Ukraine-Polish border. Families, small children, people who were sitting in cafes and going to schools just the other day and eating dinner together. Their homes are now being hit by missiles launched by Vladimir Putin. So it's a very, very sad and difficult situation, and we should all stand by for what we can do to be helpful. Okay, I think that's my final slide, and we can do some questions now if we have any.
So there looks like there was some questions that came in on chat and on the Q&A. So
okay.
We'll kind of go in order. Some of the comments on chat were comments and not questions, and you may have already touched on a few of these. So we'll kind of just see if you have any additional comments. The first question came in: how would excluding Russia from the SWIFT system hurt them financially, and why would European nations be reluctant to impose such a sanction?
It's a great question. We make SWIFT transactions here. In fact, we've got forms on our systems here. Fidelity provides it to us where we can make international transfers using SWIFT. So it's something that's built into the modern money movement system. And that is the answer, is that the way that Russian oil and gas is paid for is through the SWIFT system. And so the European nations say, if we can't pay Russia for oil and gas, then we may not get oil and gas. And so that's the only thing that stands in the way of it, is that neither side has yet pushed that big button. Russia has not yet said that it's going to stop the flow of energy to Europe. And Europe has not said, we don't want to receive any any Russian energy supplies. And so as long as that is the case, then paying for those supplies is going to remain an important thing. And that's what the SWIFT system does. And so it may be easy for the United States to say, we want to exclude Europe from SWIFT, Russia from SWIFT, because it's either they're in or they're out. It's not like Europe can keep them in SWIFT, but we can kick them out, right? They're either on the network or not on the network. And so the United States is going to defer to the Europeans on that call. And so that's the answer. Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Yeah, we've got, and I know you've talked on gas a bit here. So this question is, how does gas supplies to Europe affect the short and medium term?
Say it again. How do gas supplies?
How does gas supplies to Europe, how are gas supplies to Europe affected in the short to medium term? Not sure you touched on that a bit.
I'm assuming that means natural gas. And it's really just what I just said. We don't know. We are approaching the end of winter, so presumably that's good. That heating supplies won't be needed in a couple of months. We went through a deep freeze in Texas about this time last year, and anybody who sat in their home without heat in Houston, much less Warsaw, right? Much less even Paris. I mean, if you look at the latitude, here's a trivia question: if I ask you all on what major European city is Boston the same latitude as, what would you tell me? Anybody want to shoot a chat or a quick? Don't look either. Don't look. I just want you to take a guess. Boston, Massachusetts is on roughly the same latitude as what major European city? What would you say? Anybody? Let's get some answers coming in. No one's venturing a guess?
We've got London, Barcelona.
Uh-huh.
I'm not answering. Paris.
London, Barcelona, Paris. All right. Yeah.
Venice. London.
Venice, getting closer. The answer is Rome.
We didn't get any Rome. Yeah.
Rome.
Wow.
Boston and Rome are approximately the same latitude. Okay, so it can get cold in Europe. Most of Europe is north of Boston, right up there with Halifax and Nova Scotia and Canada up there. That is the latitude, and so Europe can get cold, and so this is a major issue, and we have to have an appreciation for that in the United States. It's like, kick them out of SWIFT, and we could get rid of their supplies. This is not an easy thing for Europe or for European leaders. We now in Texas understand that after last year. Just need 24 hours in your house with no heat, with a major winter storm not bearing down, but already there, and your house turns to an ice box, and you're like, I don't care about Ukraine, just get the heat on. Ukraine schmukraine. So it's tough. And we'll see where it goes. There are already calls for the U.S. to try and help make up for any fall in Russian gas supplies. But boy, that's going to be a real difficult thing. You would need 9 or 10 new liquid natural gas facilities in the United States, and that takes years and years and years. You'd have to have an all-out wartime build, something that would look like, the Lend-Lease program that Roosevelt and Churchill established in the Second World War. I just don't see it. So this is a very, very touchy issue, and I do not envy the Western European nations. The best thing we can say right now is that winter is on the tail end, not on the front end. So we don't know where it goes. Okay, next question.
Okay, let's see. How does this war affect the already high inflation in the U.S.?
We'll see. I think the biggest concern is the relationship between China and Russia that has come closer together. China's in an interesting position because their big business, the people who they are supplying with product and selling to are the United States, North America, and Europe. But if it went too far, China may say we're going to cut back on supplies, and suddenly Amazon can't get all that stuff that you and I like to order that generally is made in China. And suddenly we're all in a scrum over a fight for paper clips or whatever tchotchke you need to fill the gap in your life. And so we could see higher prices there. The inflation that we're experiencing right now is a global phenomenon, but it has very specific drivers here in the United States, including labor costs right now. That's not impacted by the war in Ukraine. Energy costs have been going up, and that's a result of not only supply constraints coming out of Russia, but out of some supply constraints that are here in the United States. So we can't just immediately draw a conclusion that we will see inflation. And I want to add, I want everyone to think very carefully about the word inflation, because technically, when we talk about inflation, we're not talking about price increases in particular markets. We're talking about the depreciation of the value of the U.S. dollar. And there is really very little indication that what is driving inflation right now is a lack of confidence in the U.S. dollar. To the contrary, confidence in the U.S. dollar as a result of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia is likely to be much higher right now, 2 days later than it was. And so there's demand for dollars right now. And so technical inflation, the depreciation of the value of the dollar because of lack of confidence in it, this thing we see in places like Argentina, that is not what we're seeing here. What we are seeing here are price increases being driven by specific parochial supply-demand dynamics. So I want everyone to think about that. Does it show up in inflation figures? Yes. But it isn't a technical lack of confidence in the US dollar. And in fact, what we've seen with the purported, conqueror of the US dollar, i.e. Bitcoin's down 20% year to date and has been absolutely blasted over the last half year. I had a number of clients who were interested in it, and I've sort of soft pedaled that, and it's a good thing I did because it lost half its value. So the dollar is strong right now. We're not seeing a hint of dollar deflation. What we're seeing are supply demand problems. Okay, I hope that answered that question.
Okay, can you comment on cyber warfare and cybersecurity? That's it.
All I can say is that I was on with a client who's based in Dallas this morning. He works in the energy, electricity sector, power grid types of things and transmission. Young executive at a company working on advanced projects, and they've made projects in electricity transmission lines, and so he's very familiar with the power grid. And I'm glad that somebody asked this question, because what he said to me was, make sure you have water and food. This is what the client said. Make sure you've got some water and some food, because we don't know if things get sort of hairy. And he even said it's a poorly kept secret that the Russians have malware in the software of our power grids. So I think that would be my comment is, if it's not too much trouble, New Capital clients, go ahead and get yourself some of those 5-gallon things, and just have some store of food just in case, and maybe have a plan in case, whatever, Putin gets desperate. And I don't expect this to happen, but who knows? We didn't expect him to invade Ukraine 2 months ago. So get yourself some water and get yourself some food, because it's possible we could see something. What else?
Okay, let's see. Do current events in the last 48 hours change your views on the value and protective potential of a Swiss bank account?
A very good question. This is something I know many people are familiar. I've been talking about our effort to forge a custody agreement with a Swiss bank. That bank is Vontobel, very good sort of mid-market Swiss bank. And I believe in that project, and we have submitted our documents to Vontobel Bank. Let me tell you, the Swiss are very thorough and precise, and they like to go over stuff, and that's a good thing, right? That's why I think it's a good idea. And the idea of a Swiss bank was prompted by, or the ability to keep some of your money, some custody at a Swiss bank, was prompted by the political conflict that we have here in the United States right now, and the thinking that, I have no idea where things are going to go here, and it would be nice to be able to have some alternative custody, and I still believe that. And if we can get our approvals, I'll be the first to open an account. But it is a good question, because there's now a conflict, open warfare in Europe that just moved closer to Switzerland. The Swiss are famously neutral, and I read the comments that the Swiss government made. By the way, the Swiss government is now regarded by, there are these democracy watchers who rate democracies and where they're at. The United States is no longer considered to be a full-scale democracy by sort of democracy rating organizations. It's a quasi-democracy, right? We've got all this really sort of pernicious stuff, electoral colleges and the Senate and just other things that cause those experts in analyzing democracy to say we're not even a full democracy. And they now declare or have said, one of these organizations, that now the oldest democracy in the world is Switzerland's, not the US anymore, because we became a quasi-democracy, but sort of the oldest full democracy in the world is Switzerland. So that's a very strong basis. And yet, we now have a major war that's broken out in Europe. Switzerland is in Europe. Even the Germans, sort of respected Swiss neutrality, but we'll see. So the answer is, how does it affect my thinking there? It sort of gives me some pause to think about it, but I still think it's a good idea, and we intend to continue to push through with it. If anything, it says to me that it's an uncertain world and things can happen, and so we want to be able to allow our clients to have custody both in the United States and also in the heart of Europe if they want it. It's nothing that we require, and if you don't want it, that's perfectly fine with me. But my guess is that as soon as we get our approvals, we will make that announcement and make it possible. And I don't think that the war in Ukraine is going to change my opinion about that. I will still proceed to open an account and place some of my securities in custody there. Anything else?
Yeah, it looks like there's two more questions that
Yep.
we haven't. The first one is, would petropolitics end up amplifying a shift to alternate energies and less reliance on Russian energy supplies?
Yes. I think there's no question about that. By the way, clean energy has not done well this year to date. It's down sort of in line with the fall in technology stocks. They tend to go together, and so down 15%. Clean energy stocks, but I would think that there's no question about it. In fact, the Europeans are articulating that exact thing when they say that I think it was Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of England, who said in front of Parliament, literally that yesterday, we are going to do what we need to do to cut the umbilical cord to Russian energy. And so that means either replacing the fossil fuel supply from somewhere else or going full speed ahead to solar and wind. And you may know this, but France's electricity grid is powered mostly by nuclear. France essentially is a nuclear powered nation, nuclear power plants. So Germany has been against the expansion of nuclear power plants, but they may say we'd rather reverse that course because we're really in a tough place being tied to Russia. So I think the answer to that question is absolutely, no question about it, yes. Now, how you make money on it, that's not such a simple thing, these are long-term projects, and people always think they're going to make money in clean energy, and they never do. Rarely do. I don't want to say never. I'm just saying that it's not a simple area. I think there was another question.
Yeah, it looks like this is the last one that's come in so far. Might be a good one to end it on. It said, what is the worst possible scenario of World War III, and how will you adjust our portfolios? That's a big one.
Boy, the questions today are really, really good. Well, I don't even know what World War III would look like. I don't even know that. I guess the real concern right now is that a cornered Vladimir Putin. I mean, everybody's talking about a cornered Ukrainian population in Kiev, but a cornered Vladimir Zelensky in Kiev. But this is to bring the talk today full circle. I actually think there's a very strong probability that this is the beginning of the end of Putin. You may say I'm nuts, but I'm the one who wrote the Russian thesis. There's a long history of Russian leaders going bye-bye like that, right? There really is. Tsar Nicholas and his family were taken out by their own people and executed. You had the immediate fall of the Soviet Union, and sort of the banishment of the Soviet government under Mikhail Gorbachev. You had a series of Soviet premiers who were summarily, I say a series, not a series, but there was constant skullduggery and infighting. And that's another movie that people might want to watch. It's a comedy, right? I gave you Winter on Ice, but The Death of Stalin is a comedy about what happens after Stalin dies and the infighting that takes place between his successors, including Khrushchev and anyway the others for power, and how and who succeeds Putin to power. We don't know, but a paranoid Putin could become a Putin that simply can no longer be tolerated within portions of the Russian government, and if the costs get to be too high on Russia, it is not impossible to see him lose power. And a cornered Putin, it's hard to say what he would do. So I don't even know what World War III looks like. Maybe it's a cyber World War III. What would I do with portfolios? Probably not a lot different. I mean, I like to position portfolios to deal with a lot of risk. And so I think that what we do, which is to provide you with low cost global diversification, is exactly the right thing. You've got an allocation to stocks in Australia and in Canada and in Japan, and in Mexico. Yes, certainly in the United States, a lot. But in a world war, you don't know who's going to do well and who's not going to do well. And so presumably a diversified portfolio is going to put you in position to at least survive, which in a world war is about all you're looking to do, is survive. So let's hope it doesn't come to that. It is a very, very, I think it's a very, very sobering event, this war. It has struck me and grabbed my attention, and I'm doing everything I can to stay up on it, and both as someone whose family has ancestry in that part of the world, as someone who studied and learned the language of that nation and has read the literature, but you just can't know enough. And the Russian mind and the Russian culture is very unique. Amazing people. They deserve better leadership. They really, really do. I wish that was the case. They really deserve better leadership. They could have some great leaders there, and Russia could be just the greatest country in the world. And the tragedy is that the world has been waiting for that Russia for a long time. Blessed with natural resources, blessed with people who are educated and smart and very funny and wise, and the world is just waiting for them to elect leaders who, rather than just being intentional liars, which is the philosophy that Vladimir Putin subscribes to. There is a Russian philosopher, he's dead now, named Ivan Ilyan, I think his name, or Ilyan Ivan, who espoused the philosophy that to lie, that there is no truth. There is no truth. There is no objective truth. And while we might all agree to that, there's no objective truth. Your truth is different than my truth. The goal of the Greek philosophers, Plato and so on, was to do your best to find truth, to do your best to honor the truth as you know it and understand it. That is not the philosophy of those running Russia. The philosophy of those running Russia is you can make whatever reality you want. And that means if you got to lie, do it. And so Russia deserves better than that. Russia at least deserves people who give it the old college try to know the truth and tell the truth. I would think that's what people want in their money managers, right? And their financial advisors. I can't see why they wouldn't want that also in their leaders. Russia deserves that. And my hope is that when we get on the other side of this, whenever and however that occurs, that's what results. And I'm going to continue to have hope that happens, even if Kiev falls tonight. What else? Any other questions?
No other questions. I think that's it.
thank you all. It's been great to be with you, and thank you for the attendance today. It really means a lot. We put it together quickly, and we didn't know if anybody was going to be interested, and it turned out that people were really, really interested. And I think that's just a reflection of this incredible global world event. It is a huge, huge thing. It's the equivalent, really, of the U.S. launching an invasion of Canada, right, or Mexico, which the U.S. has done, right? I mean, there was something called the Mexican War. We call it the Mexican War. You know, that was what, 1848, I think. But it's the equivalent of today if the U.S. sent missiles and planes and tanks and so forth into Ottawa and Montreal and Toronto, and then Vancouver, because we didn't like the way the government there was going. Crazy like that. So I hope everyone has a good weekend, and I can just tell you, our family's in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. That's not a political statement. That's a statement of humanity. We think that they deserve their freedom and their self-determination. We stand with them. Okay, thank you all.